Hi again, everyone. I'm Deegan, and I'm a professional comic book artist and illustrator. And today, I'm going to draw my interpretation of one of my favorite scenes from the Season 3 finale of Invincible, where Adam Eve fights Conquest. Let's check it out. Alright everyone, let's dive right into this. With every piece of artwork I create, whether it's for a comic book cover or a standalone illustration like this one, I always start with laying out basic wireframe poses for the characters and setting up the overall composition of the piece. Once I've done that, I jump right into fleshing out my final line work. I've never been the kind of artist to have a long rough draft or sketch stage. My brain tends to yell at me to get right to feeling out the final look, and I'll tweak things as I go. Here you can see me laying out Adam Eve's base form and anatomy, and then starting to work on her facial expression. Like I've mentioned in past videos, the facial expressions are always incredibly important in my opinion, especially with an action or fight scene. So for this piece, I really wanted to give Eve a very determined yet pensive look. And later on, you'll see me going for a confident, aggressive, and almost maniacal look for Conquest. Now I started to work on Conquest's final anatomy and pose. He was an absolute blast to draw in this piece. Between his bulky physique, intimidating and menacing expressions, and unique look overall, he's been one of my favorite Invincible characters to draw and give my interpretation of. Now something I did want to mention is while I am a professional comic book artist, I'm not an official artist or animator on the Invincible show. But I am a massive fan of it, as well as being a huge fan of Cory and Ryan Ottley, who are co-creators of Invincible. Their artwork has inspired me for a very long time. At this point, I started adding in some of the costume details for Conquest, figuring out how the different folds of his uniform would look and fall on his body, as well as drawing his robotic gauntlet arm. This was so much fun to draw, but also one of the most complicated. It's such a fun part of his character design, so I wanted to re-add in some of the detail here from the comics version and make it fun for you guys to look at. Here's a point in the process where I realized that his left forearm was far too long and not wide enough, so you'll see me adjust that. Now I started work on the background. With how much fun and visually interesting the contrasts are between Conquest and Adam Eve, I really wanted to have close-ups of each of them. The problem is, when doing a fight scene, you oftentimes don't get to have the characters facing forwards towards the camera. So I decided that I would do the background as a separate scene from a few moments later in the fight, once Eve is armored up and Conquest is figuring out the extent of Eve's abilities. This allowed me to have the best of both worlds in the piece. I got to have a dynamic, full-body fight scene between the two of them, but also have forward-facing close-up shots that really convey each of their emotions and personality. Selfishly as well, I just really wanted to draw a scary, maniacal close-up of Conquest. He's such a fun, intimidating character, and getting to show his personality through this insane expression is so much fun. Drawing a close-up like this really allowed me to go crazy with tiny details, like the wrinkles in his face, the chips in his teeth, the scar down and through his eye, and the dramatic light and shadow cast on his face. Here you can see me start to experiment with colors for his face a bit. Doing this allows me to make sure that the spacing of things and details will all look right once color is added. Then I started roughing in parts of his upper body. I knew that I wanted to show more than just his head, because body language is just as important as facial expression in selling and conveying emotion. One without the other really does your art a disservice. Here you can see me continuing to figure out and add in the dynamic shadowing on his right side, as well as start to add the costume details. Now it's time for Adam Eve's close-up. I start with a basic wireframe of her head, laying down lines to help with overall placement of her facial features. Then I dove right into detailing her energy armor and helmet. This was really fun as well. Getting to have this totally different look for Eve in the same piece along with her classic costume look was a treat. Now that I had all the different elements of the piece drawn, it was time to start adding in the base colors. Once I had the base colors laid out, I started adding in the darker tones, beginning with Conquest. Overall, I wanted this piece to be pretty bright, since their fight takes place in direct sunlight. But having darker tones and shadows is still important to help give the characters dimension and keep things from looking too flat. Since I was already working with Conquest's color palette, I decided to do the base colors for his close-up next. Then I dropped in base colors for Eve's close-up and rolled right into adding in her darker tones. Here I added some shine to her armor and faceplate, which really helped sell that it was like glass covering her face. At this point, I started adding in the darker tones to my main Adam Eve drawing, which really helped give her dimension and look less flat. It can be tough sometimes to do this with characters that don't have a ton of muscle definition or crazy bits and pieces of their costume. With the darker tones added into my two main drawings, it was time to add in the highlights. This is always one of my favorite parts of the coloring process because I feel like it's when things really start to come to life and have that finished look. as you can see here with Conquest. Now it was time to add highlights to Adam Eve. Her hair especially benefited from this, and it really gave it a look I was happy with. At this point, I moved on to figuring out how to color her energy effects that help her fly. I went with a tool called a light pen that really gives the effect of glowing and luminance. I really like how the end result turned out. Then I finally started adding in the dark color tones to my close-up of Conquest. Again, this was really fun. The more detail and layers I got to add to this close-up, the more I absolutely loved how it looked. Every addition really seemed to add to his craziness. And of course I had to add in his highlights. Now I was ready to start figuring out the background design. This piece was already jam-packed, so I decided on a simple blue gradient so I didn't risk making the overall artwork too busy. I also decided to add an outline color to our main characters. This helps separate them a little from the background elements and bring them forward in the composition a bit more. The final detail I decided to add was shattered pieces of Eve's energy shields from when Conquest breaks them apart in the episode. This felt like the cherry on top and really tied everything together nicely. Thank you so much for watching me draw this scene from Invincible. You can watch seasons 1 through 3 of Invincible only on Prime Video. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the Prime Video YouTube channel for more videos like this. See ya.